nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Public Security. Chen Wenqing has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of State Security, and Huang Shuxian has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Civil Affairs. Fu Zhenhua has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Justice, and Liu Kun has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Finance. Jiang Jinan has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Human Resources and Social Security. Lu Hao has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Natural Resources. Li Ganjie has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Ecological Environment. And Wang Menghui has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Housing and Urban-Rural Development. Li Xiaopeng has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Transport. Yi Jinping has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Water Resources. Han Changfu has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, and Zhong Shan has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Commerce. Luo Shugang has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Culture and Tourism. Ma Xiaowei has been nominated as the candidate for the Director of National Health Commission. Sun Shaosheng has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Veterans Affairs. And Wang Yupu has been nominated as the candidate for the Minister of Emergency Management. Yi Gang has been nominated as the candidate for the Governor of People's Bank of China. And Hu Junze has been nominated as the candidate for the Auditor General of National Audit Office. NPC deputies will vote to approve Premier's nominations, and we will keep you updated on that. To other news now, Cairo has implemented a new law to crack down on water waste. The country has been suffering from low water flows as the population continues to grow. Our correspondent Yasser Hakim tells us more.
The World Health Organization ranks Egypt as one of the countries in the midst of water poverty. The water share per person is only 600 cubic meters a year, half of the average international levels, and most of it comes from the River Nile. The government has been creating new sources of water through costly desalination projects, but officials in Cairo have also worked on reducing water consumption.
The Cairo governor received a report from the Cairo Water Company that the water wastage in the capital is about 1 million cubic meters per day. There are several reasons for the water waste, such as people using hoses when washing cars or outdated irrigation systems, and water waste in the streets and houses. We decided to activate the water company law and fine all those who waste water.
The fines range from $200 to $1,000 on citizens and businesses that create water waste. For instance, those who are caught abusing water when washing their cars will not be allowed to renew their car license until they pay the fine. It's a hefty fine, the equivalent of 6 months' salary for many, and there's been a mixed reaction.
They must reduce water consumption and apply the law to the letter. Many people waste water by washing cars and in agriculture, and they need to stop.
I agree with the decision, but the fine is too high. There are many poor people whose income depends on washing cars. Now car owners won't employ them. They will suffer.
Officials believe applying strict measures is the best way to improve people's habits when using water. But the citizens are not the only ones targeted.
We are now working with the water company to monitor all the state-owned institutions such as schools, mosques, government buildings and such, to ensure that the plumbing is in good shape. We will provide new photocell taps to help save on the water.
The new water consumption laws in Cairo are not the end of it. They will be also adopted in other cities after the capital. And at the same time, there will be an aggressive media campaign to create awareness about water consumption and water preservation. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
That does it for this half-hour World Today. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Good morning from Beijing and welcome to CGTN's special coverage of China's two sessions. I'm Li Xiuyuan. The 7th plenary meeting of the 13th National People's Congress is now underway. And joining me in the studio are Victor Gao from the Center for China and Globalization and current affairs commentator Einar Tangen. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Now let's go live to the Great Hall of the People because we want to show you the live pictures of NPC deputies voting on Premier's nomination for key posts in the State Council. Today, 5 state councillors, 1 Secretary General of the State Council, as well as 26 ministers or directors or governors of ministries, as well as commissions. So let's now see how the posts for Vice Premier and State Councillors are being determined. The Premier must first nominate candidates for these posts, deputies to the National People's Congress, then decide whether to endorse the nominees. A candidate needs approval from at least half of the deputies to get the job. Balloting will be declared invalid if the ballots collected outnumber the ballots issued. NPC deputies can only choose from the list of the candidates. And after the NPC endorsement, the president will issue decrees to the public to finalize the endorsement. Each person can serve a 5-year term. And endorsements will begin soon for the government's ministerial level officials. Here's how they assume office. First comes the Premier's nomination of candidates. Lawmakers will then deliberate the nominations. A majority of the chamber will have to sign off on a candidate for an endorsement to move forward. Lawmakers are not allowed to vote for candidates who are not on the ballot. And after the candidates are approved by the NPC, presidential decrees will be issued to wrap up the endorsement. Each official gets a 5-year term. Now, China has adopted an institutional restructuring plan for the State Council. It will now consist of 26 ministries and commissions, in addition to the General Office of the State Council. The number of ministerial level institutions will be reduced by 8, the vice ministerial level institutions by 7. Here are more details.
7 ministries are newly created. These are the Ministry of Natural Resources, Ministry of Ecological Environment, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, Ministry of Culture and Tourism, National Health Commission, Ministry of Veterans Affairs, Ministry of Emergency Management. 2 ministries have been restructured. They are the Ministry of Science and Technology, Ministry of Justice. The functions of 2 institutions have been optimized, the Ministry of Water Resources and the National Audit Office. There is also a new National Supervisory Commission. The Ministry of Supervision and the National Bureau of Corruption Prevention are merged into the new commission. It is the 8th such reform since 1982, occurring at a frequency of about every 5 years.
Again, I want to take you back to the Great Hall of the People because as we speak, the National People's Congress, which is the country's national legislature, is having their plenary session in the Great Hall of the People, and close to 3,000 NPC deputies are present. As you can see, they are casting their ballots and trying to vote on Premier's nomination on key positions in the State Council. And we're just standing by for the final results and announcement. And as we speak, as we're standing by for that, let's also get some analysis onto that. Let's bring in our Victor Gao, the Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization, and also current affairs commentator Einar Tangen. Great to see you all. So let's talk about this. This is a big day. In just a short while, we're going to hear the Premier's nomination of the final positions, including 4 vice premiers, 5 state councillors, and also 26 ministerial level leaders. And it's reported that we're going to likely to see a reshuffle. And before we get to the possible new faces, how would you summarize past State Council's legacy and what are your expectations for the next one? Victor, let me start with you.
I think over the past 5 years, the State Council, under the leadership of Premier Li Keqiang, really did a wonderful job and helped steer the Chinese economic situation through very, very challenging situation, both at home as well as abroad. And I think the overwhelming support, not only among the government officials but also among the people at large, is very evident. And the track record maintaining a very robust and dynamic growth rate for each of the past 5 years is for the whole world to see. And the Chinese economy has managed to pass through very turbulent international situation and emerged as really a very, very strong winner compared with many other countries. So I think congratulations to Premier Li Keqiang for the 5 past years, wonderful job, and also for his ministers, councillors and commissioners, head of the bureau and agencies. It's really a very solid performance over the past 5 years.
What kind of a China have the State Council inherited?
Well, I think Xi Jinping put it, government is a road that never ends, and it's continuing. And this is what it has. Right now, I think they're less concerned about collecting accolades for what happened in the past than they are about addressing the issues that are going forward. And they're there. I mean, they were outlined by the party. It's very clear. But just in terms of background, I think people need to understand a little bit, because people watching from outside won't understand a lot of this stuff in terms of the role of the NPC versus the party. The party stuff is separate. This is really the government. All right? And what they're talking about here is equivalent to a cabinet. These are the people who actually do the administration. Party sets goals. All right? They're very active in terms of that end, and they supervise. But this is really the people who, like Trump's cabinet, these are the people who have departments, these are the people who are responsible day to day to making sure that these policies work.
Stay with me, Einar and Victor. We want to also take a look at this. Under the newly passed Governmental Institution Reform Plan and the ongoing first sessions of the 13th National People's Congress, China will replace its Ministry of Agriculture with the new Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs. Our reporter Wang Hui spoke to some NPC deputies from rural areas to get their views on the restructuring. With the fresh reform of governmental institutions, the new Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs will inherit the responsibilities of the current Ministry of Agriculture and absorb some programs from 4 other ministries. They include programs in agricultural investment, comprehensive agricultural development, farmland regulation, and irrigation and water conservancy. The reform will also see the Ministry of Transport take on the current Ministry of Agriculture's duties of fishing vessel inspection, supervision, and management.
An
NPC deputy believes this integration will make the government's work more efficient.
The reform will consolidate the resources from different ministries, so the duties of taking care of this field are concentrated. In order to deal with one issue, in the past, we may have had to go to multiple ministries, but now we only need to go to one ministry and finish everything all at once.
The reform of the current Ministry of Agriculture aims to better fit the requirements of today. During the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, which was held in October last year, Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged a rural revitalization strategy. He reiterated that issues related to agriculture, rural areas, and the people there are fundamental to the nation because they directly concern the country's stability and the people's well-being. To address these issues, the party must prioritize the development of agriculture and the rural areas. NPC Deputy Dr. Zhou Songbo, who has been a doctor in rural areas for more than 30 years, believes the creation of the new ministry responds to the shift in China's policy.
The Ministry of Agriculture used to focus on grain production, but the problem of grain supply has basically been resolved. The key focus of work now is the rural revitalization strategy. It emphasizes developing economic industries in rural areas. As the emphasis of the work has been shifted, the new ministry is no longer only about agriculture, but has rural affairs to its name.
Wang Hui, CGTN, Beijing. So, Einar, Victor, we're seeing some major institutional reforms taken by the government. A number of ministries are being merged together. Some are being replaced. New ones are being added. What stand out to you the most?
I think several things. One is the establishment of the National Immigration Bureau. This is a very, very important thing, and this is a breakthrough. Previously, the function is embedded as a department in the Ministry of Public Security, which is fine for all these years. However, if you compare China's situation with the rest of the world, in most countries there is a Ministry of Immigration. and the immigration is not directly part of the police department, mainly because people coming for immigration matters will be surprised that I need to go to a police station to start with. And I think establishing this Ministry of Immigration Affairs will make it more easy for people either in China who want to go out of China or for foreigners who want to come into China to handle immigration-related matters. And this is also very much up to international standards. And I think the other thing is the establishment of the Emergency Management Ministry, because the functions were scattered around in several ministries before. By pooling all these functions together in a newly created ministry will help China to fight against disasters of all kinds, natural or man-made. And this is very good for people.
What do you think, Einar? The immigration ministry, does that mean the country is opening up its population policy?
Well, I think it's things. But I think you have to look in a much broader way at this whole reorganization. I mean, China, before, literally what they were saying earlier about having to go to multiple ministries to get something done. I mean, people have to understand the policies come down, and then at the local level, they're supposed to implement them. But to implement them, they have to get the permission for their plans. And before, it was multiple ministries for different areas. This was a kind of a check and balance within the system that they had to make sure that no one was making all of the decisions. But now they realize that they have to streamline it. They have to be more efficient. They have to rely on good people rather than pretending that the process itself can govern itself, because it was really holding up everything that was necessary to get done. Time and energy spent lobbying these different groups and then trying to coordinate their answers to this, very, very difficult, especially at the local level.
Yeah, we're continuing to see the downsides of the government since 1982, but never before have we seen institutional reforms this far-reaching. As of now, 75 ministerial and vice ministerial entities have been reduced. What kind of impact, for our viewers who are watching us, what kind of impact would this massive reform have on them?
No, I think, first of all, it makes the Chinese government leaner and more efficient. And also, the Chinese government, through this round of institutional reform, becomes more efficient in delivering the services. Let me give you a very small example. Formerly, we had the Ministry of Agriculture. Now it is being renamed as Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, mainly because purely focusing on agriculture may be necessary but not be sufficient to solve all the problems in the countryside. Mainly because agriculture is agriculture, but we also talk about the farmers, for example, and the countryside as a whole to build up capacities in the countryside. So the new ministry, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, will not only take care of agriculture itself, which is still very important, but also take care of rural affairs, including farmers, their families, all their needs, for example, as well as countryside development.
Yeah, and rural revitalization strategy is sort of the centerpiece of the government work on rural side. It makes nice applause line, but we know reality could be far challenging. How would the new ministry serve up to, the strategy, this grand vision? Well,
the whole point is accountability. Right now, most of the poor, the war and poverty, these 30 million people are in the rural areas, and it needs a comprehensive solution. You can't just say, go to this ministry for your agriculture. Oh, you want to start an agricultural business? Oh, you go to this other ministry. This is beyond the ability of, uneducated in some cases or unsophisticated farmers who are just trying to get along. You want to take them out of poverty. So I think a lot of it is about accountability. How can the government look down the line and say, look, are you getting this done?
Yeah. All right. Now, China's national legislature on Saturday approved a massive institutional restructuring plan that aims to improve government efficiency, making it more service-oriented. And this included the merger of the China Banking Regulatory Commission and China Insurance Regulatory Commission. Our reporter Liu Yan has more details.
China's new Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission is designed to address overlapping duties and the loopholes in regulatory function. The Commission aims to ensure legitimate and stable development as well as prevent systemic financial risks.
It
is beneficial to the macro control of national fiscal policy, is also conducive to the formulation of unified policy and the measures to guard against the financial risks. We have more secure protection, investment, and financial management. Experts say the reform comes at a crucial time. It's also expected to better protect the legal rights of financial consumers and further clarify responsibilities between different supervisors. China's financial system has grown rapidly in both size and complexity. It's become the world's largest, with financial assets at nearly 470% of gross domestic product, according to the International Monetary Fund.
I think currently the challenges are how we can better meet the needs of our country to develop the real economy and strengthen the overall structural reform, and to establish a sound financial service system as well as building a stronger financial regulatory system.
It's stressed in this year's government work report to accelerate financial system reform and improve the financial services system. There will be support for financial institutions to expand inclusive financial services, standardize the development of local small and medium-sized financial institutions, as well as focusing on solving the problems of financing. Experts say China has made tremendous achievements in both economic development and social progress over the past 5 years. With institutional reform to modernize China's system and capacity for governance, only by removing mechanisms, drawbacks, can development momentum be strengthened. Liu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
So let's now talk more about this. Einar, China would now merge China Banking Regulatory Commission and China Insurance Regulatory Commission. Do you think this is a good move? How does it compare with, say, similar organizations in the States?
Well, I think it is a very good move. I mean, overall, you can have different regulation areas, and the SEC is really the top one, but they don't always, they don't do the insurance. In China, you have a still fairly immature system, and new products are coming along. They look a lot to the West to develop different financial products that are bringing in, but they haven't always been what the country needs. And the problem that they have is they have a real economy which produces jobs and is really what is the lifeblood of China. Then you have this speculative economy where everyone's trying to get rich quickly, not necessarily off of a real economy, just because people are buying, so maybe I can make a profit. And the government really wants to curtail that. There's nothing wrong with speculation itself as long as it's based on reality, not rumors on the social network, not inside information, this type of thing. So moving to this real economy, they need to have an ability to make sure that the policies that they're pursuing are in fact being carried out. Shadow banking, good example.
And how are the regulators balancing, promoting financial innovation and also mitigating financial risks?
Well, first of all, the combination of the CBRC and the CIRC, the banking and the insurance regulators together into one single regulator, is a major development. And at present, we actually have CSRC, CBRC, and CIRC to regulate the banking, the insurance, and the securities. So the principle is to regulate and manage each different financial sector as it is. This has its pros and cons, of course. And originally, there was a proposal to combine all three regulators into single one and a regulator, but apparently this is a half step forward, combining the banking and the insurance regulators together, but leaving the securities regulator as still an independent regulator.
Are you saying that the Security Commission could be merged into?
Personally, I think going forward, maybe next round of restructuring, etc., that's a possibility. Okay. And I think the rationale for keeping the securities regulator outside and combining the banking and the insurance regulators is mainly because the banking and the insurance regulators follow very similar patterns in terms of, for example, capital sufficiency, in terms of how you open up your branches from one province to another, etc. So combining these two together has a lot of merit. Further, I think the financial market is changing very quickly, and capital actually crosses around the regulatory boundary without much of a pause, and many financial institutions have grown into financial groups handling both banking and insurance as well as securities matters. So it is a lot of very logical and natural to combine some regulatory functions together to better offer financial services.
And I agree with that, because what you have is both banking and insurance are long-term investors. What they're doing is, you either get deposits in and you're investing them as a bank, or you're getting premiums in and you're investing those over the long term. So these are really lenders. Very different, I think, from securities, which is a separate entity. The difficulty is when it sounds good, say, oh, I'm going to put everything in one regulatory basket, but you have to start thinking of the core competencies of the people who are going to be involved. And if you have people who understand debt but not necessarily equity, it can be a problem.
And when you look at the specifics on the reform plan, it says some of the functions and duties of China Banking Regulatory Commission as well as China Insurance Regulatory Commission, including drafting key regulations, prudent supervision, and basic financial system, will belong to People's Bank of China. What does this mean?
Well, at present, the whole financial regulatory system in China involves the PBOC, the central bank at the very top, and the three sectoral regulators on the second tier, that is the banking, insurance, and the securities. So the People's Bank serves as the ultimate regulator for all the financial matters in China. And it is not only just responsible for the issuance of renminbi, for example, or management of the foreign exchange, but it also oversees the overall systemic risks and how to manage the risks in the whole financial sector. And further, if we move one step even higher, financial matters relate directly to the overall health or lack of health of the economic system. So in China, this structure remains intact. Central bank at the top, three regulators on the second tier. Now, combining the insurance and the banking insurance together, we will leave PBOC at the top with two regulatory watchdogs. But also, I think there is a central financial matters regulatory commission, which also plays a very important role. But that's even higher level. That's even more caring for macro systemic matters. So this system in China has worked for the past several decades, and it will continue to work after this round of restructuring.
And I think this policy separating it from administration is very important. I mean, the Chinese government changes things quite often, as we are seeing today, to get to the goal. In the West, it's really about growing institutions. They talk about the culture and the history of an institution. In China, it's really simple. It's pragmatic. We need to change systemic risk. What is necessary to do that? We're going to revamp our institutions in order to achieve this. And it doesn't mean that it'll stay institutions. It could actually change in the future.
Yeah. And last year, the Office of Financial Stability and Development Committee was also set in the People's Bank of China. Does this mean that the central bank is taking on a bigger role in managing financial market risks?
A bigger role, yes, in a sense. However, I think by setting up the Financial Stability Commission, it is meant to ensure that the financial sector and the real economy, or the rest of the real economy, are not completely separated by a big wall in between. The two actually are the two sides of the same coin, and you cannot live in one area without the interconnection with the other area. And everything which happens in the financial sector may have a direct impact on the rest of the real economy. So maintaining financial stability itself is not only a matter or responsibility for the financial regulators, it is also a responsibility for the person or the agency which oversees the overall health of the Chinese economy at large, including the financial sector as well as the non-financial sector.
Yeah, and as we speak, we're hearing words that they're counting the ballots, so votes are being counted on whether to endorse the Premier's nomination of key posts in the State Council. Let's talk a little bit about this. Can you tell us more about the duties of Vice Premiers, first of all? We're hearing we're going to see 4 Vice Premiers this year. They're going to be a one principal Vice Premier, yes?
Yes, indeed. In China, in the State Council, the Premier is the head, so everything relating to the matters, the portfolio of the State Council stops with the Premier. However, China is so big, the Chinese economy is so complicated, facing all kinds of challenges, so the portfolios are divided up. For not only the 4 vice premiers, and each vice premier will take a particular portfolio, for example, science, education, health, etc., or agriculture, or financial matters, for example. So each premier will be the principal person in charge of one particular portfolio, and the portfolio could be huge. And then you also talk about 5 state councillors, and each state councillor would also have a portfolio, probably a smaller in scope or magnitude. So in this case, the premier at the top with 4 vice premier and 5 state councillors, each of them taking care as the person in charge of one particular portfolio. And each portfolio may actually contain multiple sub-portfolios. And this is the way, as Anna just said, meant to take care of the day-to-day operation of the Chinese economy, Chinese society operating in all different ways. For example, to make sure that China operates as a huge machine in order and people live in peace and stability.
Okay, I'm going to take it from here now because we're hearing words that Premier Li Keqiang is going to announce the results of the nomination list or the voting results. And just to give you a sense of what to look forward to, we're going to see 26 ministries and commissions leaders being elected. Let's listen in now.
According to the voting results, the first session of the 13th NPC has approved Han Zheng, Sun Chunlan, Hu Chunhua, Liu He as Vice Premier of the State Council. Wei Fenghe, Wang Yong, Wang Yi, Xiao Jie, Zhao Kezhi as state councillors. Xiao Jie as the Secretary General of the State Council. Wang Yi as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Wei Fenghe as Ministry of National Defense. He Lifeng as Minister of National Development and Reform Commission. Chen Baosheng as Ministry of Education. Wang Zhigang as Ministry of Science and Technology. Miao Wei as Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. Ba Te as Minister of the State Ethnic Affairs Commission. Zhao Kezhi as Ministry of Public Security. Chen Wenqing as Ministry of State Security. Wang Shuxian as Ministry of Civil Affairs. Fu Zhenhua as Ministry of Justice. Liu Kun as Ministry of Finance. Zhang Jinan as Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security. Lu Hao as Ministry of Natural Resources. Li Ganjie as Ministry of Ecological Environment. Wang Menghui as Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development. Li Xiaopeng as Ministry of Transport. E Jinping as Ministry of Water Resources. Han Changfu as Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs. Zhong Shan as Ministry of Commerce. Luo Shugang as Ministry of Culture and Tourism. Ma Xiaowei as Minister of the National Health Commission, Sun Shaocheng, as the Minister of Ministry of Veterans Affairs, Wang Yupu, as Minister of Ministry of Emergency Management, Yi Gang, as Governor of People's Bank of China, Wu Zejun, as Auditor General of National Audit Office.
All right, there you heard the results of the vote today. We're seeing a major reshuffle today. We're seeing 4 brand new vice premier and also 5 new state councilors. But Wang Yi is being nominated as state councilor this time. Let's talk about this. Wang Yong also stayed as state councilor. So we have 4 new state councilors and 1 from the last administration. Any surprise come from that result, Victor, first of all?
No, I don't think so. I think all this is well planned and well structured. And I think all these people nominated and now confirmed are very solid leaders, and they have experience, whole-ranging experience, for example, and considered very qualified for this job. And
what are the qualities and political experiences that made them here? Based on what have they been selected? Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
For example, the executive vice premier, Han Zheng, he has been the party secretary of Shanghai, mayor of Shanghai, important leader of several divisions, bureaus in Shanghai. He spent his whole life in Shanghai. And however, Shanghai has turned out to be the largest economic city in China and very sophisticated, involving very high level, very high top-notch financial services, for example, and also with very vibrant industrial manufacturing capacities, and has emerged as one of the most important international port city, international aviation city, for example. Therefore, to be the mayor and later the party secretary of Shanghai, probably with a population of about 25 million, which can make it one of the bigger European countries, for example, really has given Mr. Han Zheng a whole range of experiences and qualifications. And now I think being the executive vice premier of the state council, to be assistant to Premier Li Keqiang, but also take care of the portfolio of responsibilities in his own portfolio. We expect that Mr. Han Zheng really to live up to all the expectation from the government, from the people, and be a very outstanding leader in this round of the State Council, and make his contribution to the management of China as a whole, rather than management of Shanghai as a city.
So 36 names being announced, 4 vice premiers, 5 state councilors, 1 general secretary, 26 ministerial level leaders. Anything that interests you the most, Einar?
Yes. I mean, first off, let's look at the path of these different individuals. There's basically 2. One is that they came up from what they call the grassroots. Yes. That means they started at the village level and they worked their way up through the municipal level all the way to where they are now, which is at the very top levels of the administrative side of the government. All right. The other way that has gone is some of these individuals have been overseas. They studied at Harvard University or other places or in France, and they come back here. And this is a generational shift. These are people who speak other languages. They've had other experiences. They're bringing a lot of their expertise and observations about the West to China. So you can expect a very different kind of attitude and approach to these things. And that's why there are these kind of generational shifts. China is constantly looking for the best of each generation to offer what they can.
Yeah, very interesting. What do you look at this selection process? Because a lot of people say China's political system is one of the most competitive in the world as a political meritocracy. You've got to work your way up, like Einar said, from the grassroots level, and you've got to be very good at what you do.
Absolutely. If you look at the foreign ministry, for example, Foreign Minister Wang Yi now has been nominated and confirmed as one of the 5 state councillors. He spent his whole career in the foreign ministry, started up in the Japanese Japanese section in the Asian Affairs Department in the Foreign Ministry, and he really demonstrated his outstanding qualities very early in his career, and then continued on to his very important diplomatic career as the head of the Asian Affairs Department, for example, rising all the way up to the foreign minister. And in his capacity as foreign minister, he really handled very, very tough international challenges and crises as the chief diplomat of China, and he represented China very outstandingly, and he has won widespread acclaim from his counterparts in many other countries. And now, as a state councillor, it would help him it will enable him to perform his functions as the top diplomat in China better, mainly because not only the foreign ministry is under his leadership, but also other functions partially or wholly related to China's foreign matters may also fall within his portfolio. And the expectation is that he will definitely live up to the expectation and contribute China's diplomatic work and the foreign affairs management.
And one of the things that is really unique about the Chinese diplomats is it's quiet. It is very disciplined competency. I mean, you're not seeing the kind of things that we're seeing right now, where Rex Tillerson is out by tweet or brought in and things like that from an oil company. These are people who are lifelong civil servants. They understand the system that they're supposed to represent. They are completely informed about the policies. They're not wondering what the next policy is going to be or if there's going to be a major shift. They just do the day-to-day work that is necessary to advance.
Yeah, and China's foreign ministry is a very unique case as well. It's rather an extension of China's domestic policies. It was primarily to serve the country's economic development goal. That was the most primary goal above all else. But will we see a change from now on? What do you think?
I think...
because, the words pragmatic or no strings attached, those are the words that are being used to describe China's foreign policy in the past. Will we see a shift?
Exactly. I think the Chinese foreign ministry over the past 40 years has really changed a great deal, not only in terms of the size of the foreign ministry, in terms of the numbers of the diplomats, but also, very importantly, in terms of the new functions added to the foreign ministry. For example, consular affairs used to be very, very important, but relatively speaking, small in scope, because 40 years ago, China's consular services was not necessarily very, very big in size or importance. But now, with more than 100 million Chinese people traveling abroad every year, with Chinese interest everywhere in the world, and with Chinese people sometimes caught up in danger, being hijacked, for example, or going into areas where civil war or turmoil were happening, the consular services need to be significantly beefed up. And I think the foreign ministry has won tremendous amount of support and recognition by people in China who travel everywhere in the world for the immediate, prompt, and very effective delivery of consular services to the Chinese citizens everywhere they are in the world. Further, I would say, as part of the Chinese transformation, the foreign ministry has taken on economic matters, mainly because when you talk about foreign affairs or diplomatic services, one key part of that is China's evolving and increasing economic and trading relations with the rest of the world. You cannot talk about diplomacy without thinking about and caring about economic and financial aspect of whatever China stands for. So this is really changing very fast.
All right, hold your thoughts. Let's take a short break, and when we come back to this, you're now watching a special coverage of the two sessions. We'll be right back.
Two sessions is an exciting time. China has a rich history, but with lofty goals for the future.
As an African journalist covering the two sessions, I will share my insights into what the policies entail and how they will affect my continent and the rest of the world.
1.4 billion people heading in the same direction. How will the policies of the coming days keep the country on track?
Controlling financial risk is most critical. Broadening anti-corruption is most meaningful. President Xi Jinping's vision for 2035 and for 2050 is most enduring.
A team of journalists from China and around the world looking at critically important issues that will help define the 21st century.
The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
If we move together, we can have a dance.
Straight into the eyes.
Poverty alleviation achievement in China is unprecedented.
For me, it's a responsibility.
Straightforward and straight into the new era.
To know more and to sense more.
Straight Talk with Tian Wei from the 2 sessions.
Welcome back to our special coverage. Today, 4 Vice Premier of the State Council have been just elected, and here are their profiles. First of all, we are going to take a look at the resume of Mr. Han Zheng, currently a member of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee. Han Zheng has been elected Vice Premier of the State Council. And born in April 1954, Han Zheng graduated from a master's degree in economics from the Institute of International Studies at East China Normal University in Shanghai. Han spent most of his political career in Shanghai. And from 1991 to 1995, he served in various positions, including Secretary of Communist Youth League Shanghai Municipal Committee and head of Shanghai's Luwan District. And ahead of the 2010 Shanghai World Expo, Han was named Deputy Director of the Organizing Committee, as well as the Executive Director of the Executive Committee. And after serving as Vice Mayor of Shanghai for 5 years, Han became mayor in 2003, a position he held until 2012. He was Deputy Secretary of the CPC Shanghai Municipal Committee for 10 years until 2012, before spending 5 years at the committee's secretary. And also Han joined the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee at last year's CPC National Congress. And second up is Ms. Sun Chunlan. Sun Chunlan is currently a member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee. She has just been elected this morning as the Vice Premier of the State Council. Now, born in 1950, Sun Chunlan earned a master's degree in politics at the Central Party School in Beijing. She spent most of her early career in northeast China's Liaoning province, serving as Deputy Secretary of the CPC Liaoning Provincial Committee from 1997 to 2005 and Secretary of CPC Dalian Municipal Committee from 2001 to 2005. Now, between 2005 to 2009, Sun served as Secretary of the leading party members group of All China Federal of Trade Unions. Now, in 2009, she was named Secretary of the Fujian CPC Provincial Committee. And in 2012, she joined the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee and was also named Secretary of the CPC Tianjin Municipal Committee. And 2 years later, she became the head of CPC Central Committee's United Front Work Department, a position she held until last year. And thirdly is Hu Chunhua. She has been elected Vice Premier of the State Council as well, who has been a member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee since 2012. And born in 1963, Hu Chunhua graduated from Peking University with a Bachelor of Arts in Chinese Language and Literature. Now, he spent around 20 years working in Tibet, ending his time there as Executive Deputy Secretary at the CPC Tibet Autonomous Region Committee. And he also has worked 6 years in the Communist Youth League, first as one of the secretaries before moving up to become first secretary of the Central Committee Secretariat in 2006. And 2 years later, he worked as governor of northern China's Hebei province before becoming the secretary of CPC's Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region Committee in 2009. And he then served as secretary of the CPC Guangdong Provincial Committee until 2017. And lastly, we have Liu He. Liu He has been elected Vice Premier of the State Council today. He was the Director of the General Office for Financial and Economic Affairs and also Vice Minister of National Development and Reform Commission. Born in January 1952, he holds a Master of Economics degree from China's Renmin University as well as a Master of Public Administration degree from Harvard University. He started his career as a teacher of industrial economy at Renmin University in China in 1983, and later he worked for the National Planning Commission over 10 years, mainly on long-term planning and industrial policies. From 1998 to 2003, he mainly worked for the State Council Information Office. And from 2003 to 2018, he served as the director of the General Office of Central Leading Group for Financial and Economic Affairs and vice minister of the National Development as well as Reform Commission. Now, the outgoing central bank governor Zhou Xiaochuan will retire from his job after 15 years of service. During his long career at China's central bank, he has been a firm advocate of reforms. As the next central bank governor is set to be elected, let's now take a look back at Zhou's legacy.
Zhou was appointed as the central bank governor in December 2012. In January 2013, he also assumed chairman of the central bank's Monetary Policy Committee. His appointment was extended twice in 2008 and 2013, making him the longest-serving central bank chief in the history of China. Throughout his career, Zhou has been a firm reformist of China's monetary and financial systems. In 2003, Chinese major state-owned banks were struggling with a high ratio of non-performing assets. To ease the banking industry's predicament, the government decided to adopt shareholding reforms. The big 5 state-owned banks were subsequently transformed into a mixed ownership structure by introducing private and foreign investors. Zhou Xiaochuan was leading a special working group to supervise experimental projects of the reforms. Under his leadership, the central bank provided substantial aid to the success of the reforms. The interest rate liberalization reform was on the agenda of Zhou's third mandate. In 2013, the central bank announced a full liberalization of loan rates. And with the introduction of deposit insurance, the bank announced the liberalization of deposit rates for financial institutions in 2015. Another remarkable achievement of Zhou's central bank is RMB internationalization. The process started in 2005 with the establishment of a floating exchange rate. With reference to multiple currencies other than the US dollar, the reform carried on with experimental cross-border yuan settlement projects in 2009 in the domestic market, and since then in overseas markets. In 2016, the RMB joined the IMF Special Drawing Rights Basket.
So let's talk more about this. As we mentioned, Zhou Xiaochuan has retired from the PBOC's governor from this position, and Yi Gang is now being elected as the new governor of PBOC. What can we look forward to, monetary policy-wise, future direction?
I think Mr. Yi Gang has a very solid educational background as well as a working background. He actually earned his academic degrees in the United States. He started up as a young and aspiring student over there and spent quite a few years over there. So he knows the U.S. situation quite well. He speaks excellent English, and then he started and initiated several academic societies while still in the United States, gathering Chinese students of similar minds together to exchange views and talk about various kinds of things, including China's reform and economic development. Later, he decided to come back to China, and he worked with the PBOC ever since, rising up in the ranks and files, and eventually became the head of the SAFE, State Administration of Foreign Exchange. Later, he became a vice governor of PBOC. And I think Mr. Yi is a typical example of Chinese students studying abroad who wanted to come back and find a place and a position of importance to work and devote his academic and working experience and eventually excel.
Yeah.
And now I think with his appointment as the governor of the PBOC, he will contribute to maintaining the financial stability of China and also the management of the foreign exchange reserve in China, but also providing a very solid and stable, steady hand over the financial management of China for the coming several years.
He's also a protege of Li Xiaochuan, so no changes are expected. I mean, he was also a professor in the United States at Purdue University, speaks English fluently, obviously. As I said, this kind of a new generation who are bringing a lot of expertise. And it's not just about knowing the American system. It's just the existing Western financial system that China really entered into in earnest in 2001 when it joined the WTO. So I completely agree with Victor on this. This is a good example of how China is able to attract back some leading students to actually contribute and be part of the system.
Thank you very much. Now, another man I want to take a look at is, of course, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. He's just been nominated, he's been elected as the state councilor and also the foreign minister. And he answered questions from a wide range of diplomatic issues to the press. Here are some of the reviews of the headlines. Take a look.
Competition aside, China and the United States don't have to be rivals, but we should strive to be partners in cooperation. Trade war is never the right solution. In a globalized world, it is particularly unhelpful, as it will harm the initiator as well as the target country. China's proposal of suspension for suspension was the right prescription for the problem and created basic conditions for the improvement of inter-Korean relations. Now is a crucial moment for testing the sincerity of the parties. As China continues to grow, the first theory has collapsed and become an international laughingstock. If Japan does not prevaricate, flip-flop, or backpedal, and instead comes to terms with China's development and welcomes it, China will be willing to act in the same spirit and work with Japan to put our relationship back on the track of healthy and steady growth.
So in just a short while, a member, 10 member of the senior state council members will be sworn in front of the National People's Congress, and we are waiting for that to happen. When that happens, we're going to take you live to the Great Hall of the People. But in the meantime, I want to take a look at the profile of the foreign minister. He's now being elevated to the state council because previously the foreign ministry of China, this is very interesting, it does not... It actually executes the foreign policy, but it does not make the country's foreign policy. But now with the foreign minister elevated to the state council, will the foreign ministry have a bigger say in foreign policy making? What do you think?
Well, the Chinese foreign policy involves a whole overarching structure. At the very top, it's the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Over the past 5 years, he is truly the real leader of China's foreign policy. At the second level, you have Mr. Yang Jiechi, who is now a member of the Politburo, who used to be the former state councilor and the former foreign minister and the former Chinese ambassador to the United States. Now, on the third level, it involves the state councilor and foreign minister Wang Yi and the whole apparatus of the foreign ministry itself. But as the state councilor, Mr. Wang Yi probably will also be in charge of several other portfolios. But coming back to the functions and the responsibilities of the foreign ministry, yes, indeed, it is the chief doorkeeper of China's foreign policy. In the rest of the world, it truly represents China. And in terms of, for example, implementation or initiation, I think the foreign ministry is important in both respects, mainly because by implementing all the decisions, not only by the foreign ministry, but also from the central government.
Sorry to interrupt. We're hearing words that senior members of the State Council will be sworn in as we speak in front of the NPC. Let's go live to the scene there. And here's how China State Council works.
For this morning's plenary session is completed. According to the rule of oath allegiance to the Constitution for the first session of the 13th NPC made by the Presidium. Now we proceed to the swearing-in ceremony by taking constitutional oath. Now the first session of the 13th National People's Congress oath allegiance to the Constitution ceremony starts. Please all rise. For the national anthem of the People's Republic of China.
请坐下。
Please be seated.
现在请
Now,
中华人民共和国国务院副总理韩正、
Comrade Han Zheng,
孙春兰、
Sun Chunlan,
胡春华、
Hu Chunhua,
刘鹤、
Liu He as vice premiers of the State Council,
魏凤和、
and Comrade Wei Fenghe,
王勇、
Wang Yong,
王毅、
Wang Yi,
肖捷、
Xiao Jie,
赵克志宣誓
Zhao Kezhi as state councillors
由韩
to
正
take the
领
oath
事
allegiance to the Constitution. Comrade Han Zheng will take the lead.
"请宣誓人就位。
Please come to the center of the stage.
"请宣誓。
我宣誓，
I do swear
忠于中华
I
人民
pledge to
国宪法，
be allegiant to the Constitution of the People's Republic of China,
护宪法权威，
safeguard the Constitution authority,
履行法定职
perform
责，
obligations given by the law,
忠于祖国，
be loyal to the country,
忠于人民，
and be loyal to the people,
恪尽职守，
be committed
廉洁奉公，
and honest in my duty,
接受人民监督，
accept the people's supervision,
为建设富强、
and
民主、
to work
人民
for a great modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful.
和谐美丽的社会主义现代化强国努力奋斗。宣誓人韩正。
All right, that was the big unveil. 10 senior members of the State Council have been sworn in. Quite a solemn scene there, very ceremonial with the music. Let me bring in our commentators, Victor Gao and Einar Tengen. How important is this ceremony? How important is the fact that they are pledging allegiance to the Constitution in front of the entire NPC Congress, in front of the people of the country?
I think the constitutional ceremony, swearing ceremony, is very important, both substantively as well as symbolically. They are doing this in front of the whole NPC delegates, in front of President Xi Jinping or the other senior leaders, but more importantly, they are doing the swearing-in ceremony in front of the whole nation. Mm-hmm. Everyone in China is watching, yes. And also in front of the whole world, because China is now getting more and more important. Whatever happens in China, including especially such important events, are being watched very closely by the rest of the world. So it will rededicate themselves, they will recommit themselves to the causes and the defending of the Chinese Constitution.
And no one is above the law, no one is above the Constitution.
Well, and symbolically, before you had this, it was just they would stand up there on stage and people would clap and that would be the end of it. And what this does is it symbolizes that there is a document, that there's a rule of law, which is everybody is looking up to that. It's not the people anymore. I mean, the people on the stage anymore. It's what their service is to and under.
Yeah, it's a great sense of symbolism.
And one of the things I wanted to pick up on what Victor said is this: why is Wang Yi being elevated? Well, quite frankly, I mean, since the days of Zhou Enlai, there's never been a period that China has been more active I mean, you have the Climate Accord, you have the Belt and Road Initiative, you have the peacekeeping efforts. China is now engaged globally, and before, I think the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was more information gathering and reporting and then executing. Now they need to be more involved in the actual crafting and to draw on kind of the resources of people who've been in these countries and can give them good advice.
Yeah, we're hearing words. Our correspondent Su Yuping is standing by at the Great Hall of the People. We're going to get to her in just a short while. But let's talk about the new cabinet. This is known as the central government, also known as the new cabinet of China. What are the top priorities for this new cabinet?
I think China is now in a very unprecedented position, both at home as well as in the world. And I think the main task of the new cabinet or the new state council is to steer a steady course for China's domestic economic development, keep the momentum of opening to the outside world and reform, implementing all the major decisions adopted for China's reform, and also enhance China's position on the global stage, make sure that the One Belt, One Road initiative will be fully and successfully implemented, and also to ensure that the Chinese people live in peace and stability and continue to enjoy prosperity, and then also to make sure China in the world is to be welcomed, understood, and appreciated in a sense for its contribution to peace and stability on the global stage.
I agree with everything, Victor, but in terms of the three policies, it's still poverty, pollution, and systemic risk. That's internally. Externally, they have to deal with what's coming at them. If Donald Trump throws $60 billion worth of tariffs directed at China under its 301 program, that's going to be an issue. How China navigates this kind of new reality is something that has to be done time and time. And you've seen not only these people, but Wang Qishan has been brought in because he's an old hand. He's what they call the firefighter, I guess, out there. But these are the people who understand where the U.S. is and have a better pulse. So he's putting his team in place that can respond appropriately.
Yeah, and the Premier also said in this year's government work report that China will create a new landscape in all-round opening up. What's your understanding of this new landscape, and how will this cabinet execute his vision?
Yes, indeed. I think the Premier Li Keqiang emphasized that point, and he raised a lot of expectation from not only the whole country but also from the rest of the world. I think the next round or the higher form of opening up would involve both going out as well as coming in. In terms of coming in, many foreign companies operating in China want to have greater access, more equal treatment, and better and more transparent handling of the issues that they are raising. For example, they want to increase the equity shareholding percentage in some of the institutions. They want to set up their wholly owned operations in China. They want to have equal access to Chinese banking. They want to have their IPR rights better protected. I think the Chinese government will do a lot of work to ensure that all these points raised by the foreign companies operating in China will be very carefully listened to, and the good suggestions will be accepted, and new policies will be adopted to make sure China opens up more and more, and China will treat fairly and equally foreign companies operating in China with the Chinese companies, either state-owned or privately owned. In terms of going out, definitely, China's flow of capital, flow of manufacturing capacities, flow of expertise and know-how, and flow of Chinese managers, for example, will continue, and China will be better and more integrated with the rest of the world. So in terms of both flowing out or flowing in, China needs to open up better.
And I would put, China has now reached the apex in terms of certain technologies. If you're talking about online shopping, banking, a lot of areas. You have Huawei with their technical superiority. So now China's in a very different position than it was a few years ago. It actually has an opportunity to be a world leader and to take its technology out. Huawei with the new 5G standard, for example, they're really being aggressive. They're getting pushback from the West, especially the U.S., where they were basically said, you can't come here. And I think China is trying to say, look, we're going to be a lot more fair, but we want you to be fair with us. Mm-hmm. So there's a quid pro quo in this, and I think they're trying to normalize the international standing of China as both a place to do business and a place to business will be coming from.
Yeah, and as you said, a number of the senior leaders are educated overseas, so presumably they will know better about what the world needs from China and essentially increase and expand the scope and quality of this opening up.
I think they can cut through a lot of it's a mystery to many people who have not been abroad exactly what people want. What is all this noise? Why don't you sit down and talk to us? Now, they're in a unique position. They've been professors. They've been at the Harvard School, the Kennedy School at Harvard. They understand these people. They understand what the real currents are versus the kind of political noise that's out there constantly in the background.
Yeah, a new generation of leaders looking forward to see what kind of change can they bring about to the country. Now, let's go live to our correspondent, Su Yuting, who is standing at the ministers' corridor. It is where the ministers will meet the media and give brief interview. What's so special about this time is that will be the last time of the minister corridor, and the 26 newly elected ministers will meet the press for the very first time. So, Yuting, this can be regarded as a media debut for the new ministers. How's the mood there? Tell us more.
Yes, Qiuyuan, exactly. This is the 5th time for the launching of the Ministers' Corridor. And you can sense the atmosphere around me. You know that there are huge crowds of journalists and cameramen waiting here for the arrival of the new ministers to come here to answer the questions from the journalists and also to talk about the future policies that will guide the country's future development in the next 5 years. And as you can see behind me, that there are increasing number of the journalists here because you know that this time the new ministers will just give their answers to the media's questions, and it's very important for them this time because you know that the institutional reform is already on the top agenda of this year's 2 sessions, and you know that there are more anticipation from the media to know the answers from the new ministers, and you know that this time the ministers' corridor is much open than usual because for the journalists they can even scan a quick response WeChat account of the ministers' corridor and submit their questions to the ministers. So we're all very looking forward to the new ministers coming here and answer questions from the journalists. Qiuyuan.
So what can we expect from the new ministers? What kind of questions are journalists around you want to ask?
Yes, Qiuyuan, you know that reform is the key word during this year's 2 sessions, and institutional reform has already been taken to strengthen the government's structure and also make the government service much more people-oriented one. And it will just establish 26 new ministries. And you know that I've already talked to some of the journalists, and they told me that they're curious about what measures the new ministries will take in the near future. For example, the Ministry of Ecological Environment, a journalist told me that they're very curious about what kind of policies will be taken by the Ministry of Ecological Environment to protect the environment, to improve the air quality and curb pollution. And another one is very important is that the country has already transitioned from the high-speed growth to high-quality development. So high-quality development is also another keyword and also another topic for the journalists to ask about the new ministers. And they know that they want to know what kind of measures will be taken to boost the development of the innovation-driven economy. And lastly, the journalists also told me that they're curious about what kind of policies will be taken to improve the well-being of the people, including the medical services and also reforms in the medical sector. Back to you, Qiuyuan.
Thank you very much, Su Yuting, joining us live from the Ministers' Corridor at the Great Hall of the People. Thank you. And we're just expecting the 26 newly elected ministers to speak to the press any moment from now. In the meantime, let me bring in our current affairs commentator, Victor Gao and Einar Tengen. What would you be specifically looking out for from these new ministers? Einar first this time.
Well, I think everyone's looking for the details. I mean, we know the broad brush of all the plans. We know where everyone wants to go. The question is how you're going to do it. I don't know that they're going to release these details at this point. I think there's a tremendous amount of work initially to be done in terms of reorganization. I mean, you just don't, you have to take old ministries, you literally have to put them together. It means possibly new offices, a whole new organizational plan, things like that. So they really have their work cut out for them. I think you can expect that a lot of the work has already been done in terms of policy and things that they want to float. They've had a number of experiments out there, models that they've been tinkering with to make sure that they work properly before they roll them out. So this is the kind of thing that I think they should be asking. I don't know what they will be asking.
What about you, Victor? What are you interested the most about?
Well, I think this will be the first time for these 26 new ministers to face the nation together and face the world. So the impression will be very important. They need to really make a very important first impression on the nation and on the world. Secondly, I think every one of them probably will have a chance to speak to the nation, to answer briefly questions addressed to them, and people will have a chance to see how they speak, how they look, how they deliver, how they perform. So this is also important. But more substantively, I think they probably will describe what's their vision is, what's their aspirations, because many of them will have very, very different things to do. For the foreign ministry, for example, it's more or less the same. But then for the newly created ministries like the Veterans Affairs Ministry, the Emergency Management Ministry, etc., the new ministers probably need to think about hiring people, setting up offices, probably lining up budget, how to do all these admin stuff, etc., before they really jump into the depth and the width of all their responsibilities. So each one of them will have different things to think about. But at the very top, I think they think about the same thing. That is how to serve the people, how to make sure that ministries will perform the functions designed for them to make sure that the Chinese government is leaner but more effective and deliver all the services and live up to all these expectations.
And what do you think of the whole idea of Minister's Corridor? I mean, this is a new setup. We don't have that in the past. This is the first year we've got a chance for those ministers to directly speak to journalists, answer questions from the press. Do you think they did a good job? What do you think?
Well, I think it's a wonderful idea, but it's completely high pressure. If you've not been trained in how to present yourself, it can be nerve-wracking. I mean, all of a sudden, it's fine to be. I mean, most of these people have made appearances, they made speeches and things like that. But suddenly, be on national TV, you're elected. You have to, as Victor says, you have to reorganize your entire department. And now people are going to say, "Oh, well, what are you going to do?" And I think that can be very, very tough. But it's kind of trial by fire. They're going to be watched very carefully about how they handle it, if they're able to be an effective communicator. And this is part of the kind of growing up in the leadership of China.
Yeah, what do you think, Victor? This whole idea of Minister Corridor, are we going to see them next year? Are we going to keep it?
I think this is a wonderful thing, mainly because people in China, in the world, get a chance to see these ministers in real action, and they want to see